Okay, so we will convene the meeting and call it to order. The first item on the agenda is the minutes from May 6th. Is there a motion?
Move to approve, subject to modification.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. Page 1.
Did you, under number 3, Ted, are you comfortable with that last sentence? I couldn't remember what action you actually took.
Yeah, I am. That's pretty much what I said. I've actually reached out to Matt about that, and we're going to connect.
Great.
So, yep. He actually said he might comment a little bit about that in his presentation tonight, too.
Okay.
So, yep. So, page 2. Page 3.
At the top of page 3, establishing such as establishing a tree nursery were not town functions. I say may not be town functions. Don't want Chapin coming after me.
Okay. Continuing on page 3, anything else? Page 4. With that one modification, all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There are no nays. The ayes have it. Next on the agenda, public comment. This is a moment for anybody in attendance or watching online to make a public comment. It can be about things that are on the agenda, but it need not be. Is there anybody in the room that wishes to make a public comment at this time? Seeing no one. Eric, is there anybody online? Oh, he's attending a technical issue. Is there anybody online wishing to make a public comment? No. Okay. Next, the FY24 audit report overview. So I'll call up.
Is Rick connected? Yep, Rick, I'll connect you on Zoom right now. Just got the, you'll clear up. I'm going to be able to accept the panelist invitation and you can share your audio.
There we go. So I can kick things off, Ted.
Yeah, please do.
So we share with the board the completed FY24 audit report, and a big thanks to Shirley and her team for all their great work. It's a big lift every year to work on our municipal audits. So our auditing partners from Sullivan Powers, we have Rick Brigham, who will walk the board through the audit. We started doing this a few years ago. It's quite a hefty document with a number of schedules and elements to it. So this provides the board just an overview of what the audit is, and some things to point out. Shirley, did you have any comments before we get started?
No, I'll let Rick go and add comments to what he has to say.
Hello, Rick.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me here tonight. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of go through a few of the highlights of the audit with you. Obviously, as Eric said, this is a large document, 81 pages, a lot of information here. Most of my audits that are done, the actual financial statements are prepared by the auditors. This is one of the few audits that I do where actually Shirley prepares this whole document. So she did a fantastic job in the preparation of the reports. As far as we did, all we're really responsible for is pages 1 through 4. If you're looking at that, that's what we call the independent auditor's report. So when we have given an audit report, we have 3 choices. You can have an adverse opinion, you could have a qualified opinion, or you could get an unqualified opinion, which is the best you can get. And once again, the town of Williston achieved an unqualified opinion for the 6/30/24 audit. And I always like to congratulate all my clients who get to that level, because a lot of them are striving to get there, but it takes a lot of time and effort to get everything ready and done. And so I thought that went really well this year. Kind of looking through pages 5 through 13, if you looked at nothing else in the audit report other than the clean opinion, this is what we call the management's discussion and analysis. This is a user-friendly, readable document that you can go through and get out with the real highlights of what happened during the year, and it's all worded so that you can, like I said, user-friendly, where you can really understand it and easy to kind of go through. So if you looked at nothing else, read through that management's discussion and analysis. It's a good place to kind of pick up really the highlights of what happened during the year. Kind of skipping over to page 16. So this is your balance sheet of your major funds, your general fund, your capital fund, and your ARPA. Basically, the balance sheet is a snapshot in time of your assets, liabilities, and fund balances for the year. And so looking at your, one of the numbers we probably focus on the most is looking at the general fund, the bottom number, the fund balance, 4,697,325. And I always like to dig a little deeper and look at the unassigned fund balance, which is for you guys, 3,654,414, which I think is in a healthy level and quite, you're in a good spot there. Compared to last year, that unassigned was 3,668,544. So pretty darn close to what last year's was. And you'll see how the capital fund shook out a final fund balance of 3,579,843, and then the ARPA fund is all zeroed out now. The other column in there is the non-major funds, which you'll find in the back. Those are the other small funds that exist that all get rolled up into this major category. So if you're looking at the next page, basically that's the income statement, revenues and expenses of those three major funds and the non-major funds to get to your total fund balances. Also, kind of looking at page 19, that's, again, a balance sheet for your enterprise funds, your water, sewer, and your stormwater. Again, looking at your assets and liabilities, subtracting the liabilities from assets, you've got your fund balances. And looking at the water fund, there's an unrestricted fund balance of 1,827,238, which appears very healthy. And the sewer fund fund balance of 4,667,214, again at a good level. Stormwater fund fund balance of 2,702,815. So a lot of times when I go to municipalities, those numbers are negative. So I think you guys are in a good place for your enterprise funds as far as 6/30/24. Obviously, 9 months has passed since then, so a lot of information probably has changed since then. If you look at pages 24 to 53, we're not going to go through them, but I want you to know what's here. These are what we refer to as the notes to the financial statements. If you're looking for a deeper dive into cash, what's collateralized, what's insured, what are our debt terms of our debt agreements, what are the fund balances, what can they be used for? These notes to the financial statement provide a much deeper dive into a lot of the assets, liabilities, and fund balances at year end. So if you're looking for something specific, try to go back to these notes and it'll give you a lot more information on when you're looking at your assets, receivables, things like that. Pages 54 through 65, that's your budget actual. You've been used to seeing that pretty much all year long. I don't think anything in the audit that we did changed this too much. So you're probably staring at a report you've seen many times and probably hasn't changed much since the year end when it was last done. One of the requirements of the audit and the communication with the board is if we find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we are required to report those. And so I'm pleased to report that we did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies to report in this year's audit. And again, congratulations for that. Obviously, sometimes there's some other recommendations, and we usually report that in a separate letter that we give to management. And, you know, again, none of those are required to be in writing, but it talks about putting in some policies, documenting your internal control system, fraud risk assessments, things like that. But there's things, those are all been communicated. You probably have copies of those, but I didn't need to go into any of those in particular. Other required communications for the audit to go to the board is we encountered no difficulties in dealing with staff or management. We had no disagreements with staff or management. There was no consultations with other auditors, and all entries we proposed were posted by management. So overall, I was very pleased with the process of the audit. And I think, you know, it was a lot of work for Shirley and her staff, and I really want to thank everybody there for helping us get through this and get a good year-end report. Any questions?
Jean?
I just have a couple, and there might be more for Shirley. I don't think they're just like what I found some things that were interesting, and so the ARPA money, I see a big increase in revenue because we moved the ARPA from ARPA funds to, did we move it to non-government? Is there?
It's in the general fund,
It's in the general fund,
Yep.
okay. So it's restricted or unrestricted?
unrestricted. Most of it is restricted because most of it you've already designated for a purpose. There's a very small portion of it that hasn't been committed to something yet.
Okay. Hang on. These aren't hard questions, they're just, I have 10 minutes on the agenda, so I have to ask a couple of them.
So we know you have to fill it.
On page 34, receivables. It just says allowance for doubtful accounts ambulance of $300,000. Does that mean we aren't likely to get the revenue for that, or what's that mean?
We are likely to get some of it, Jean, but there is some really old balances in there that, like 2017, 2018, that are with collections, and there is a very high chance we're not going to collect. a
So this is
good
sort of
portion.
accumulated of, so the 508 number, the ambulance receivable of 508, that's like current?
Mhm.
And then this is that,
It-
is this
it's
more than half
everything.
of our revenue is not gonna get collected? Is that what we're,
Well, no, because that's only a couple months, the receivable is
okay,
whatever's outstanding at June 30th, right?
yeah.
So, and that's not more than half of our revenue. But I am going to be working with the collection agencies to see what we are going to write off, which just, we've passed the statute of limitations, so they can't collect anymore, and we are certainly not going to make efforts by the town to collect. We don't have the resources to do that, but, so.
Maybe the state treasurer will take care of it.
Yeah.
On the next page, 36, it says, construction in progress. Do we still have construction? What construction?
It's
still-
work in progress, but when they call it
We just have to clean
construction
it
in
up.
progress, it's projects that are,
$500,000, so.
let's see, we have a lot in there for Trader Lane. We have, like, one of Bruce's big dump trucks, that we have the chassis but no body. We have some three police vehicles that were purchased, but they weren't upfitted, so they're in process because they're not depreciated yet, so.
Okay, so it says
There's-
construction, but it's really anything in the capital fund.
It's anything that's
Purchased,
in-
but not whatever.
Yep.
That's not being depreciated.
That's it, thank you, Rick. All right, last one, page 44. Fiduciary, this is just curiosity, fiduciary funds restricted for Chittenden County Public Safety Authority. I didn't know what that was.
You want to answer that one,
I
Eric?
can answer it. I'm the treasurer.
I know what it is.
Shirley does
Treasurer,
the
so.
I think so.
No,
That
the
is
custodial funds are not ours, we're just holding it for somebody.
Correct. That's the effort for regional dispatch, where the 5 towns created a union municipal district in 2019, I want to say, where we worked to stand up a regional dispatch service provision, but we weren't quite there a couple of years ago where we didn't have the capital funding. So we still have that governance in place, or have a board of directors. I serve as the treasurer. We meet probably once a year or so, but as being the treasurer entity, we've managed just holding some funds from those other municipalities, and they were in some CDs which have now matured. When our board meets next, there's a discussion about whether to return those funds to the municipalities that put the money in. I think of Williston, there's maybe $40,000 or so that we put into that back in 2019, 2020, I want to say.
No, because I was on the board, so it's gonna be later than that. but
Maybe it was like 21,
Maybe.
22-ish, something like that, yeah.
It's been a while.
Well, if you can get them to donate it towards our radio tower, which is public safety,
Oh,
then let them use it.
If those are released back to the town, then
We can use our
it's
40.
the board's discretion of where to reallocate those funds.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the only one, the other question, which is a little more the fair one, you want to talk about the credit card usage that was in the management letter? I know that's a tough nut
I
to crack.
forgot what that was.
Basically that, well, it was on here about paying sales tax on credit card. The credit card's just such a pain in the neck to
Exactly,
well.
and they're usually small amounts, so if they're larger amounts, then we make the, whoever purchased and paid sales tax go back to the vendor and submit the sales tax forms, exempt forms, to get the sales tax credited back. But it's a waste of time for two or three or
$2,
four, yeah, exactly, it's more staff time than it's worth to get that back. But we do always emphasize that if there's sales tax, you need to send them a sales tax exempt form first, but that doesn't always happen. So, I guess, staying with the management letter, and Rick, we've been working because of the audit of our schedule of federal awards. In this uniform guidance policies that you picked up, so yesterday, I had a call with the state of Vermont DPS. They were selected to review us. The fire department has a grant for like $17,000. So they did a financial monitoring review first before they'll provide the award. So the conflict of interest policy and the purchasing policy, you will see those sooner than later, because they won't grant an award until we update those policies. And they've been long on the list, it's just been having time to get to them, so they're gonna
So
make it to the priority list.
What you're telling Rick is that these other people are much more important than Rick, who keeps telling you to put these policies in place, but now there's money.
She's already told me that.
No, I'm just saying that we'll have an HR person and then.
I was
more
just
time for finance.
gonna put a plug in for that.
Great, thank you. Eric, when we do the water, sewer, stormwater fund budgets, I'd be really interested in talking a little bit about some fairly hefty unrestricted fund balance and what we plan to do with that, how much we need, same kind of conversation we have with the general fund a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, Rick, while we have you, something we've talked about is, the fund balance or net position of the enterprise funds. And, is there a benchmark we should be looking at, based on assets, based on other factors, just a board has a
It's
fund
real-
balance policy for the general fund, but not for the enterprise fund. So that's been a conversation the last few years.
I will say that's a little trickier. I mean, the general fund, you always want to have that reserve specific because of cash flows. The hard part about enterprise funds is a lot of the construction that's going to be that's happened or is happening, whether you're borrowing. So I think I could go back to GFOA like guidance and talk to Shirley about what they recommend. But for me, like I said, I find in a lot of cases where I'm going through the audit report that sometimes with my clients, those numbers are negative, and you guys are a good place, and I think you're at a good place that's helpful for cash flow and for making sure that if there's projects that are needed that weren't planned on, that you have the fund balance for that. But as far as a general percentage for enterprise funds, I don't know that I've ever given kind of a guidance for that, but I think that GFOA would have some information and guidance on that I could pass along to Shirley.
Okay.
I reached out to the city of Essex a while ago, and they were still trying to put something together as well. They don't have one either,
Yeah.
so.
We'll dig into it a little more. This will be on your agenda the next meeting, so we went through them today at the staff level, so.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 weeks to put it together. Thank you, board, for indulging my curiosity.
Any other questions? If not, there is a proposed motion if we're ready to entertain it.
Gene, I
have had
think
it
you
in front
should
of
do
me.
the
I know,
honors,
but I
yeah.
gotta find it first. I move to accept the fiscal 2024 audit report and single audit report from the town auditing firm of Sullivan Powers as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. The ayes have it. The motion carries.
Thank you, Shirley, nicely done.
Yeah. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much.
So next on the agenda, volunteer interview and appointment for the Development Review Board. So, Brian, come on up. So, good evening.
Good evening.
Just wondering if you could just tell a little bit about yourself and why you want the position, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So, my name is Brian Curtis. I'm a, I guess, longtime Williston resident. we currently live up on Highlands Ave, also own some commercial property. I spent the last 24 years building an IT consulting firm. I sold that in 2024. And I find myself now with some free time and having always wanted to donate or give some of my time into my community. I saw this advertisement and thought that would be a good way for me to start and share some of my experience with the town.
Okay, great. So I'll start off with two questions. Why the DRB?
So I'm interested in real estate things and have had different experiences with them, mostly on boards, or not boards, whatever they're called, associations, for either where the business is and where the house is. So I understand some of those things. Otherwise, yeah, it seemed like an opportunity that wasn't going to take too much of my time, but enough of my time that I could be plugged in.
Right. Then the next question is a little awkward, and we used to have Jeff Fears ask it, but he's not on the board anymore, and then Greta had to ask it for a long time. But now I've taken over for a while, although I think Ellie's up next. But the question is about conflict of interest, and specifically, how would you recognize if a conflict of interest existed, and if you did recognize that one existed, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, ethics plays a lot in that, right? So if I feel like I'm making a decision that isn't just purely to the benefit of the town, that I might get an advantage or one of my friends might, I think that would probably be how I would analyze that situation. And then what I do, yeah, I think I would share it. So I think I would just let the rest of the board know that, I maybe know something already, or I have been exposed to it already, and then hope that I can get some feedback from that group if I should abstain or just make sure it's clear when I assist in making decisions.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Are there other questions from the board?
I'm just the comment that, and you got there eventually, but it's like, sometimes it's just the perception. You don't want the rest of the board or the town to think that you have a conflict of interest. Just talk about it, and the board can say, you're fine, or, yeah, that's awkward. I know some people are like, well, I'm, it's a friend of mine, but I'm fair and unbiased. You could probably just share it, but have you, I think you just sort of answered it at the beginning, but since you own property in town, have you been in front of the DRB?
I have not actually ever been in part of the DRB, and it's not quite the same from what I understand, but spent a lot of time with stormwater and dealing with stormwater in our commercial development. But otherwise, no, that's probably the closest I've come is the stormwater items that we had to work through.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from the board?
I've got one. I don't know.
Nope.
I don't see my light.
There you go.
Okay. How would you approach a situation where a proposed development meets the technical requirements but raises strong community opposition?
That's a good question. I mean, I think by being curious and learning more as much as I can about why there's opposition, and then making sure I understand the technical requirements legitimately to make sure they are meeting the technical requirements. So I think that the short answer is to just be curious and to learn why people might be so upset about a particular project.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
You do realize how much work this is.
I'm a little nervous about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am.
Given that we are in and we're going to be talking about it a little bit today, but in the midst of updating our town plan, have you had the chance to kind of look at the town plan, the new town plan, or be involved in that process at all?
I haven't been involved in the process, but I've looked at it, used the website to kind of look and see what's happening there and, comfortable with it, if that makes sense.
Yep. I think it's helpful for us to encourage all of our boards and, everybody to familiarize themselves with the town plan, so. Good.
Yeah, and I feel like I will have some work to do to understand some of the regulations and rules that the plans will need to abide by.
Anything else? So this is, as I understand it, this is a position that is open immediately, And then
Yep.
there are other positions that are not up for discussion at this meeting for decisions. So we would be free to make a motion now,
Yep.
because there's one candidate and one position, so. Is there a motion?
I move to appoint Brian Curtis to the Development Review Board for an unexpired 3-year term through June 30th, 2027.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays, the ayes have it. So congratulations and our condolences, Brian.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
I was
your
going to say
efforts.
thanks, not condolences.
I'm sure it's both. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brian.
So next, the Patrick Leahy Burlington International Airport update.
So we're
Come up.
pleased to have Director Nick Longo and members of his team here this evening. I think it's timely that we're doing this update, we're talking about the economic development chapter of the town plan, because certainly you'll hear the airport is a major driver of our economic development in the region, among many other things. So turn it over to Nick and team, and I can drive your presentation here.
Okay, perfect.
So actually, if you could introduce yourselves for the.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll start with Larry.
Larry Lackey, Director of Planning, Engineering, and Sustainability at the airport.
Thank you.
Jeff Bartley, Director of Innovation and Marketing.
And my name is Nick Longo. I'm the Director of Aviation at the Patrick Leahy Burlington International. Thank you, Board, for allowing us this time. Thank you, Eric, for setting this up and speaking with us on many occasions on many different subjects. We won't take up too much of your time. What we wanted to do was just say hello. We wanted to give you a quick update of where we are, what we're doing.
With a 32-page presentation.
With a 32-page presentation that we're going to do less than 30 seconds per page. It's a very short
It
presentation.
ended up being an hour and a half at South Burlington.
That's what I bet, yeah.
We're going to, there's some nice quotes in here, lots of data in this presentation that is mostly for your view and the public's view, either for questions tonight or of course, to look at later on. What I wanted to start with is maybe the third page there, Eric, which is just kind of the who we are. The FAA, or the Federal Aviation Administration, really guides a lot of what we do. We have many federal entities that we report to, and of course the regulations impact us. But what the FAA classifies us as a small hub airport. We have 2 runways, one large, about 1.5 mile long runway that is mostly used for commercial and military, and then both of the runways are used for corporate and general aviation, which could be anything from a small prop plane to a corporate jet. We see on the commercial airline side about 1.4, 1.5 million passengers per year, and that's both leaving and inbound to the airport. We're busy. In fact, I think the last time we were at this board meeting was pre-COVID, and we weren't talking about some of these numbers, and now we're talking about and stating that we are the second busiest airport in New England. Take that in for a second, because that's really, really busy. The only other airport busier than us on the number of operations, landings and takeoffs, is Boston Logan. So Portland, Maine, Manchester, New Hampshire, even beyond New England, like Rochester and Albany, Bradley, Connecticut, we have about 40,000+ more operations than some of these other airports. We're a port of entry. We have U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, which we've had for many decades, and we're growing. We work with amazing partners like our new partners, Beta Technologies, all the way to existing partners like our Vermont Army and Air National Guard, inclusive of an amazing support with mutual aid and fire services at the airport.
Next slide, please. Right now, from a commercial standpoint, we're very, very busy, and we are continuing to grow, and we're setting records. Right now, we have 6 airlines at our airport. We have 3 major airlines in Delta, United, and American Airlines. We have a couple low-cost providers in Breeze and Frontier Airlines, and as well as Sun Country. We believe this is the most airlines that we have had at one time, at least dating back to 1990. We go to the next slide. Going back to 1990, as all, we have the most nonstop destinations that we have ever had. There's been a lot of conversation about JetBlue leaving our airport. There was definitely a hole filled, or that needed to be filled, and Breeze Airways has really done a really good job with that. We have 5 destinations, and next Thursday and Friday, Nick, myself, and a member of our marketing team will be heading to Charleston for an inaugural flight that we've never had, direct flights to Charleston, South Carolina, so we're pretty excited about that. And next slide, we'll talk very quickly about, we're not just about commercial, and we're not just about the Vermont National Guard. We play host to many commercial industries, and Nick will talk about the economic impact shortly. But we have Aerodyne, Burlington Technical College, FedEx, and other cargo operations which may be expanding in the future. Heritage Aviation, the Weather Service, Pratt & Whitney Canada, which is their largest facility that they have. Of course, University of Vermont Medical Center and their evac helicopter, and the 2 guards, and of course the Vermont Flight Academy, which we're very proud of as a really great tool for those looking to get into the aviation industry.
As we do look at our economic impact to the region, it obviously grows and it impacts not just Chittenden County, but really the entire north half of Vermont, even northern New York, northern New Hampshire. These numbers are pretty old. We used these numbers back in our 2017 in a completed 2020 master plan study, which studied our economic impact to the region. Pre-Beta Technologies, which started, again, pre-COVID, with a couple of employees and now has several hundred employees at the airport. And I'm not going to dive too much into Beta Technologies because I think we've hopefully have all heard about Beta Technologies, and certainly happy to take questions. We're currently undergoing an economic impact revision study to make sure that we really truly see and can share some of these numbers to boards like yourselves and other communities. The city of South Burlington is currently undergoing an update to their economic impact study, and we're also working with the state of Vermont to make sure each one of these sections, from valuation to the over 5,000 jobs that are currently at the airport, and the equivalent salary that's on this slide, and also the numbers associated with taxes given to the state of Vermont or paid to the state of Vermont through direct revenue streams at the airport. A great example is rental car agencies. Obviously, we're an airport and we do a lot of business with our airline partners, but we have a $40 million gross revenue stream in just rental cars alone, and that's an impact to state taxes as well as local option taxes, unfortunately not to Williston, but to the city of South Burlington.
And if I could just quickly interject as well, that we are an enterprise fund of Burlington, even though we reside in South Burlington, and we only have about 55, I think is our head count right now, employees that work directly as that department, and they are responsible for the entire airfield, the terminal, and everything that is required to keep these 5,000 jobs operating. I think that's a really cool fact that I'm pretty proud of.
And if you look at the next slide, to Jeff's point, 55 employees and an engineering department that is essentially exclusively to my left right here. We do a lot of work. Just in the next couple of years, we have about $180 million worth of capital planning and purchases associated with many different items. Our runway is, of course, our most important asset that we operate. We have to keep a safe and operable runway. Our parking garage is probably our most expensive asset that we own and consistently needs that work. This is actually just associated with funds granted through Federal Aviation Administration opportunities, and you can see with the dark, on the right-hand pie chart, the dark blue, green, and orange, you can see a big part of that pie comes from the federal government, which we have a very close relationship, and even in some of the volatility of the federal government today, we continue to strive to hit huge benchmarks to support new projects, like one of the ones that we're going to talk to you in just a couple of slides.
I don't mean to take you back too far. When you say 55 employees of the airport, and then the other 4,000 or what,
Yep.
are like, they work for the airlines, or is that what they work for the airline,
That's
or
right.
TSA or something like that? They don't work for the airport?
Correct. Yep, just 55 FTEs that are directly City of Burlington employees, like ourselves.
Yep.
Everybody else is airlines, rental cars, concessionaires, janitorial services, Heritage Aviation, which is a fuel provider and de-icing. The Vermont Air and Army National Guard is also part of those numbers, both full-time and part-time positions. So yeah, everybody else that is operating there.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And if you go 2 slides down, there you go. There you go. That's you.
That's me. We rely heavily on data when we're making decisions, and one of the misnomers look, I got to share a microphone with you. Misnomers in the airline industry, that as an airport, we can go to particular airlines and say, you know what, this week we want you to fly here or whatever have you. That's not the way it works. We have to make business cases. In fact, in 2 weeks, Nick and I will be down at a conference called Jumpstart, where we will be literally meeting with 12 airlines. It is literally speed dating, where you get 15 minutes with each airline and you make your business case in your presentation. And that's really what got started Frontier having their conversation about coming back to us, as we had a good business case for them. And we rely heavily on data. And right now, when we look at our market and our catchment area, we are still hemorrhaging, 35, 40% given in the year of people looking to fly out of Boston. But we are retaining a majority still of the market here in Burlington. We don't see much leakage over to Plattsburgh, Albany, Manchester. There's not much. If we do see somebody leaving from Montreal, it's likely because they are going international. And even those going to Boston, likely international flights or like a long east to west coast flight that they're looking for. So we're feeling good about where we are, but there's definitely more room to grow, and hopefully in 2 weeks we're pretty successful in our pitches at the Jumpstart. Next slide. It's a little hard to see on the screen here, but we talk about data and we look at our areas of opportunity. We know how many passengers daily leave our airport and where they're ending up. The blue bar right here is an indication of how many are flying out of our airport, and the red is who are not, and where they're ending up. This slide, which is quarter three of 2023, so a little outdated. We have some updated numbers coming soon. But with the loss of JetBlue and their whole market, Orlando, Sanford, Southern Florida were huge opportunities for us. And with Breeze coming in, we're seeing very full flights, and they're continuing to expand their services with 5 direct flights to Raleigh, Tampa, Orlando, Fort Myers, and Charleston starting next week as well. So things are looking really, really good for our airport in servicing what our direct market needs are in Vermont.
I'm dying to know, how do you calculate the leakage number? I'm counting the number of people who don't take my service.
If you live within about a 3-hour radius, we know if you're flying out of Burlington or not. That could be anything from credit card data to other Department of Transportation data that the airlines have.
I'm curious.
Yep.
Creepy, I'm curious.
And also one of the reasons we don't necessarily display up-to-date information, because this is also competitive information as well. Yeah. All of these flights, all of our airlines, we of course want to bring in more seats. The more seats we bring in, the lower the prices or the average prices on those particular airlines are. But the more seats we bring in, and you can go to the next slide, we need to make sure that we're filling those seats or providing the marketing support to our airlines. The only thing I'm going to highlight on this slide, there's a lot of data, a lot of raw data that you can cruise through on this, is that blue dashed line, the only dashed line on that line chart, and that's our projected number of seats departing BTV. And that's a prime indicator for us. We always look at what are the airlines scheduling for seats, and how does that compare year over year, month over month, day over day even. You can see it's pretty high. In fact, that purple line is 2008 numbers, and that's the highest the airport has ever had on the number of seats, just prior to the big recession in 2008, 2009. And we ended that year with about 750,000 total outbound passengers multiply that by 2 is essentially what we have for in and out. You can see there's a couple of points, especially in the September, October, or the leaf season for Vermont, that exceeds that. In fact, last year, the green line, we hit those targets, the highest September and October in the history of the airport, and we're expecting to do the same thing. And if you hit the next slide, you can see year over year our historical number of passengers throughout that time frame. And again, we're looking at a very high number of passengers. Right now, we're projecting around 730,000 total outbound passengers of the airport. That'll hit over pre-pandemic numbers of 2019, which was our second highest, just after that 2008 number. So we're looking really strong. The bottom line is, like Jeff was saying, we have more airlines, we have more seats, and we're filling those seats really, really fast. The prices are still slightly higher than the region, but not by much. The problem is we don't have enough seats for the demand of our market right now. And that's exactly what Jeff and I and the team are trying to do, is get more seats, lower that airline cost, and provide opportunities and fill destinations that really need support. The New York market for us is probably our biggest market that we truly need support with. But if you ask any small hub airport in the country, or at least on the middle of the country to the East Coast, New York is a tough market right now because of FAA restrictions, air traffic control issues, and those types of things. But we are still hitting those milestones, and that's despite JetBlue and other airlines leaving. We're still growing.
And I'll add too, and forgive me, Nick, if you already said this, that from a cost perspective, we are one of, if not the lowest cost for airlines to fly out of in our region. So we have a huge competitive advantage. We are our financials are very strong, and that's a testament for costs that we don't have to bear. The Vermont International Guard Fire Department, for example, but also strong relationships with Beta, our concessionaires, and other ancillary revenues as an enterprise fund that we can keep at the airport, and then we don't have to pass that on to the airport. So the opportunity is definitely there, and we have the demand from a passenger standpoint. And the airports are definitely recognizing that, or airlines, excuse me.
All right, a little bit of highlights. More passengers, we need better amenities and a terminal. This is our newest terminal project we call Project Next, standing for the North Expanded Terminal, Project Next. Also happens to be our next project. And this is what we really need. We need to modernize, right-size our terminal building. If you've ever been on the north side of our terminal, where American Airlines and some of the gates with United Airlines, it gets really small really fast. It's a space that was designed for regional jets, 50 passenger planes on a single aircraft. 4 gates down that area, it's about 200 passengers that can be there. Unfortunately, we don't have many 50 passenger planes anymore. Our average size aircraft throughout the year is over 90 seats on a single plane. Some of those aircraft go down this space and they have over 150 seats on a single plane. Multiply that by 4, you can have 1,000 people in this space that was designed for 200. It just doesn't work anymore. We're lucky, like I reported in a couple slides ago, to have a lot of federal support and federal funding, especially just prior to our Senator Leahy leaving. He left us with a congressional directed bill of $34 million to help support a brand new terminal building. So this is what Project Next is all about. And if you go to the next slide, it's all about sustainability for us throughout our conversations at the airport. We're building this new terminal building, which is under construction right now, with mass timber products. So all the steel is up, and there's not much steel in this building. The rest is going to be made out of sustainable wood products throughout the entire terminal. We're also looking at geothermal just adjacent to the building that'll heat and cool this building so we don't have to use as much gas or electrical resources. And of course, solar will be on the roof. And this is a great picture of a brand new public space, pre-security. If you've ever been to the observation tower, this is bringing that observation tower back to the airport. Again, pre-security, where you can go onto a patio outside overlooking the airfield and enjoy that as a member of the public without a ticket in your hand. And the next couple of slides are just really nice previews of this new building that's being built. You can see the wood on the ceiling, polished concrete floors, very simple. We're trying to do a modern feel, but also keep our Vermont airport alive and our Vermont feeling alive.
And if I could add that image right there, where the passengers are, all of you should have received an invite recently to our Skyline Soiree. If you haven't received an email, look in your junk folder. We'll be hosting a groundbreaking celebration. Instead of shovels and dirt, we have a band and food and a cocktail hour right there on that image, because the concrete is laid, and we're looking forward to celebrating this on June 4th.
You don't want to miss it. It's going to be great. Open air, beautiful space.
You-
Still under construction.
Just gonna have you turn the mic back on. Yep, there you go. Yep.
And then the next two pictures are just images of our future terminal expansions, not just what we're building, but also our 2030 plan for our terminal building. Now we're gonna head right into a quick update on our noise program.
Okay, I think everybody's familiar that we've gone through a process of a noise exposure map. This is done to study impacts around the airport from noise. If you're looking at this map, you'll see three basic contour lines around the airport, which is a 75 DNL, a 70 DNL, and a 65 DNL. The last two NEMs that we have done have been driven by an operational change. First, the last one before the one we just did was because it was projected numbers from the F-35s, switching from the F-16s to the F-35s, okay? We did projected numbers so we could start realizing programs to take advantage of federal dollars to help people that were impacted. We just recently did another noise exposure map, which was 1 year after the F-35s had been operational with real data. These contours that you see represent the real data that we have and the impacts from the 65 to the 75 DNL lines.
I work outside all day and I just love watching the planes fly over. Sometimes they fly right over the farm and then I'll stop what I'm doing just to watch them go over, you know? I think it's amazing.
You're such a kid.
Especially the big, you know, like when the C5 comes in or something.
So you should see us in the office.
My office overlooks the airfield, I have a great view of it, and he doesn't know how unproductive I am.
So
What's CNL?
So day-night level, basically, you're aware of what decibels are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this takes somewhat of an average over a 24-hour period of time for a constant number, so you can determine eligibility for programs to assist in sound mitigation.
Okay.
So, and if you're interested, all that information is on our website. You can go and visit there and see it. So, the next thing we want to talk about is a noise compatibility program, which has been approved for years, which allowed us to acquire flight tracking monitoring systems, which I think everybody is aware of. They can go on BTV Sound. We have 3 locations with 3 noise monitors, one on the Williston Road where we lease, or not lease, we get an easement with the town to place right off Williston Road. We have one at the Winooski Town Hall, and we have one at City Hall, and we have one at the Chamberlain School. You can go on BTV Sound at any time, and you can see real tracking of flights and the sound levels at those monitors at that time in decibels. So,
Is that the same monitors we have, or do we have other ones?
Same one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right across from U-Haul. And
Yeah, right
it's
across, yeah.
a piece of land that we had, so we did an easement 3 or 4 years ago to get that put in.
So the noise compatibility program allows us to update the NEM, which we just spoke about, and then that allows us to get into the programs that we can offer, or we can work with the FAA to seek grants to assist people that are impacted by noise from aircraft. It's the noise is a combination of all aircraft that use the airport. So we have purchase assurance programs, we have sales assistance programs, and residential sound installation programs. From the noise exposure map study that we did, we potentially, for each town, we have approximately 341 in Burlington that could be eligible, Colchester, 9, South Burlington, 618, Williston, 90, and Winooski, 1,382, which I'm glad to report that we're now on our 5th grant with respect to the noise residential sound installation program. We currently have 68 homes under contract that are receiving the sound installation program, which is windows, doors, insulation, HVAC systems that are moving forward right now.
So that's eligibility for any of those, or for the appropriate program, right?
Right.
The homeowner, the property owner can choose which program they would like to participate in.
Oh.
It does depend on which average
That's what I
contour
was
line
thinking
you're
it would
in.
be, yeah.
But yeah, if they chose the purchase insurance over the sound insulation program, they can do that as well. So far, nobody has, only sound insulation has been selected so far. Larry and I and the team went out in the field last week sometime, and these are on average, about $100,000 per house upgrade with new windows, doors, and sometimes new insulation on the interior walls.
Yeah. And we're in and out in 2 weeks, doing over $100,000 of improvements. 3 starts and 3 finishes a week. Of the 68 we have under construction right now, we're up to about 25 of those. And we're moving forward to apply for additional grants year after year to continue this program, so.
And so this is for folks who's less than 75 DNL but above 45 DNL? So like I'm just outside that?
So it's inside
line?
the 45, okay, you're talking about the contour? Okay, so
Yeah.
anything above 65 is potentially eligible for residential.
Oh, it just lowers it
Yeah,
to 45.
yeah,
So
those
if
are-
you're
yeah.
above 65, you're eligible.
Right.
Well, we're mixing two different things. So you are potentially eligible with between the 65 to 75 DNL, that average contour noise. If you're eligible within that area, the products that would be installed would decrease your interior noise levels to the 45 dB DNL line. So that
Okay.
45
is only for interior noise benchmarks that the FAA requires on these projects.
Okay.
And that's why we get into HVAC and maybe having to have the windows closed so you have cooling and heating, the appropriate cooling and heating.
All right.
I pulled our map back up just for the board, if you haven't seen this, or this update. So this is the Williston area. So there's our nose monitor orient here. It's Route 2, U-Haul. So this is kind of the north and south Brownell Road area. So kind of lamplight neighborhoods in here, and then over to Industrial Avenue area up here, and then kind of on Shumpike Road area down here.
So like lamplights, very close, but most of it's not eligible?
Anything in that last contour is potentially eligible.
Yeah, it's right here.
And the purpose of all of these programs, the noise compatibility program says what we're gonna do within those noise lines. The NEM says where we're going to do it. But just because the property is located within there, and it's only eligible for residential, places of worship, educational facilities, those are the 3 primary ones, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be eligible. If your interior noise level is already at the 45 decibel or lower, then you may not be eligible for these programs.
Gotcha.
So the further we go out, the more likely that more houses or more properties are not going to be eligible. And we have to perform acoustical testing both pre and post-construction to verify that we're actually accomplishing what the FAA requires.
Can I just ask what you mean by, I guess you said sort of average, because certainly there's the average noise of just regular 90 or 150 passenger, airplanes going over your head, and then there's the F-35 going overhead.
Right.
So how does that get taken into effect?
Well, certainly 65, 70, 75, those aren't decibel levels that you're hearing. Even on a commercial airline, you may be hitting 80, 90, and on an F-35, maybe 100, 105 decibels, not that average. So the way I describe it is a controlled environment of studying that particular aircraft and inputting it into a computer model. The FAA, those noise monitors, for example, we're not allowed to use those noise monitor data to include in this noise exposure map. Because if you consider every flight is different, every noise that that monitor picks up, whether it's an F-35 or a fire truck, we can't use that data associated with just aircraft noise. And then you add on climate and other weather phenomena that each day, each circumstance is different. So the FAA has a very, very quantified and qualified data set for each aircraft, essentially in the world, that would then be put in number of operations, throttle settings, those types of things that we work with each operator of those aircraft. In the instance of the F-35, we have extensive conversations with the Vermont Air National Guard on exactly where their throttle settings are, how long they depart, what altitude they are, and then we overlay that with actual radar data so we can see the height above and everything like that. Then we use that scientific controlled atmosphere noise data and we input it so that that creates that average level of sound. And that's the only way the FAA allows any airport to apply for additional residential sound insulation, purchase assurance, any of those types of funding to make sure that there's a standard across the board, across all airports for particular funding opportunities.
You can
I
check.
hope I answered that.
Yeah.
I did, he's
Yeah.
dying to say something.
You can check these monitors anytime, like background noise, the Williston one is somewhere between 65 and 70 decibels all the time, because it's along the Williston Road. But then you go into Winooski, and it's 50, 55 at the City Hall, or Chamberlain School. So, they're around 50, yeah. So,
But if we didn't have a Air National Guard mission, and I totally support having a mission, so I'm not saying we shouldn't, but if we didn't, then those contours would definitely be different, even if the F-35 is only flying once or twice a day.
Yeah, and any change to this current operation is going to change those contour lines, and that's why the FAA does say every 5 years, verify and redo those contour lines. So we're going to be doing this over and over and over again to make sure that it's accurate, and if there's any changes in the future, whether it's military, transient military aircraft come in all the time, like those C-5s and C-17s, those are all input in there. Commercial operations, general aviation, beta technology, so all of those types of flights would require a change to the noise map. And yeah, certainly may decrease or increase the noise map over time.
I mean, it's just very interesting and complicated, because I know, Greta works at our elementary school, and when the F-35s go over, they stop teaching, right? They just stop teaching. So it's really noisy, but I don't think any other planes, it's not in the flight path for anything, really. So it's just the F-35s that.
There's other planes all the time, but they're not, it's not.
Yeah.
We don't notice it indoors, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
No, it's just
Yeah.
really interesting, because everyone wants to make this very simple, and it's clearly not. It's a simple calculation.
It's a very complicated process, right? It's more than 3 or 4 slides on a slideshow for sure. Very complicated, lots of communication, not just with the community, but also with the users of those particular aircraft and the changes over time.
When you redo this exposure map, do you notify residential and commercial properties that now may be included in this that formerly weren't, or do you wait for them to come to you and say, hey, it's loud?
Yeah, both. We've done extensive advertising, not just in the Observer, but
Right.
other media sources and online sources to make sure when we updated this particular map, we had multiple hearings, multiple conversations, multiple public hearings to display these maps and have a presentation associated with it. The goal, though, of these maps is truly land use development regulations. And that's why you see the map is overlaid on that land use map, not just for your community, but each community. That way, in the future, building codes and other types of things can also be associated with future development. Once this map is published in the Federal Register, which it is, any future development that is within those contour lines will never be eligible for any of these programs. So it's essential that communities do have land use regulations associated with what's inside that noise contour line. And every time it changes, we're gonna make sure we mark it as best and as often as we can to make sure property owners, renters, commercial properties know that these changes are coming. If there's no more questions on the noise, the last couple of slides is just about our sustainability program. We really pride ourselves in making sure no matter what we do, whether it's a transition to electric vehicle fleets, like our own operations and maintenance fleets, which is being changed to partnerships with electric aircraft manufacturers. We're really proud to say that this is the first year and only the second airport in New England that's received this airport carbon accreditation. We're at the level 1 status. There are 7 stages of this process, which is a lifetime of achievement of making sure not just that we study, but we also actively reduce our carbon footprint. Everything that we can control, like building a new building with geothermal and mass timber, to the things that we don't control, like aviation fuel and commercial aviation fuel. However, we can use process, procedure, even some regulatory guidance to make sure that the fuel providers do bring in things like sustainable aviation fuel, which does reduce carbon emissions by about 40%. That is the true future of fuel usage for the larger jet operations. So there's a long history here and an even better forecast of what our sustainability program looks like. And on the next 2 slides is just examples of a pretty drastic transition that we're making. We have some of the only electric fleet that are actively used for 24/7 inspections of our runway. We're not burning fuel anymore when we're going out on our runway, or even sometimes coming to places like this and other places when we have our electric Ford and of course our partnerships.
But you can't just go slide by. Which one of you gets to drive the fancy sports car?
I spent a lot of time in Montpelier, so I get.
Just thought you were going to slide that
It's
one by.
pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And one of the challenges is charging these types of vehicles. And as the fleet grows, we need more charging opportunities, not just for our fleet, but for our passengers as well inside of our parking garage. That's going to come in time. But partnering with Beta Technologies, they were able to produce a charging station that not just was able to charge a Leo, which is their aircraft right here, but also help us charging our fleet of vehicles as well, which is an awesome partnership that we have. And we're at I think like 30 minutes, so I think we did it. And that's just a larger image of the map, just in case. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? Comments?
I was gonna ask if, I heard mass timber, and then I was gonna ask if you looked into the NBRC, and then I asked my computer and it told me you got it, so
We
that's
got it.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the
So
first
glad to see
time.
that's part
Yeah.
of the funding stack.
In a long time, we've only accessed FAA funding, and the opportunities with NBRC or the Northern Border Regional Commission and their mass timber program, we received about a $1.7 million grant just to support our timber program.
That's great.
Yeah.
So seriously, we do have folks who live in the noisier part of those circles. What I'm hearing is that there's a pretty robust program to do the most that you can realistically. I mean, you've got some emails saying like, well, yeah, they soundproof my house, but now I'm trapped in my house. So I assume because this is, clearly some of the towns have a much bigger problem, not bigger problem for the individual, but a number of people impacted, that you've been dealing with this for a few years now. Is there anything more we should know or anything more we can do to help those folks?
Yeah. I think the more federal funding we get, obviously the quicker that we can actually access individual properties to reduce the interior noise or offer any one of those programs. The FAA does require us, logically, to go at the higher noise levels and work our way outwards, and Williston, of course, is more on the outer side of the contour lines. It's taken decades prior to the F-35s arriving. The F-16s were there, as well as all the other aircraft that added to the noise contour lines. It took decades to go through that acquisition program. And I hope it doesn't take decades to go through our sound insulation program, but it's been a few years already. We're hoping that we receive around $5 million a year in FAA grant funding, but it may take another 10 years. It may take another 15 years before we actually finish. And the unique opportunities at each property, we're working with individual homeowners, specialized designs, unique ordering of windows and doors. It takes time to get through each one, and commitment, not just on our part and the FAA's part, but the homeowner's part of scheduling. Nobody wants to be out of their house for a week, unless maybe you're receiving $100,000 in improvements, but it takes time to get through that process. The really great thing is we're moving really fast, faster than I think as fast as we possibly can, especially with the constraints of the FAA and any other federal funding sources. So we're here. We have on-site consultants. We have in-house at the airport if anybody has any questions. We have a dedicated staff person, both Larry and his new assistant who's coming on in a couple of weeks, as well as a consulting firm that will be on the airport in the terminal to help guide, answer questions, and really to facilitate maybe the biggest question, which is, when am I going to be on that list to be in there? And it may take years.
And we did work through the winter this year, and the people were very happy as quickly as this happened, so we'll keep moving. So.
Other questions?
One quick one, just given a lot of the headlines with the concern around airport safety and shortages around air traffic controllers. Are you experiencing any difficulty at BTV?
Yeah, we're not immune to the difficulties in some of our routes associated with air traffic control shortages. Prior to my position at this airport, I was an air traffic controller down in New York City, and I know that there are heavy constraints, and this was 17 years ago, but there are heavy constraints down in that area, and I still communicate with many of my colleagues down in that space. So whether you're talking about Newark or any of the other New York area constraints, FAA is working really hard to divide some of those areas. A good example is some of the Newark airspace has now gone over to the Philadelphia air traffic controllers to divvy up some of the congestion. Everything that we do is related to safety, whether we're talking about inspecting our runway, which we take rulers out to make sure our lines are painted within the centimeter of where they're regulated to be in, to asphalt repair and anything like that. And that's all because of the standards of the FAA to make sure that aircraft land and depart safely. So everything we do is associated with safety. I think it's an extremely safe industry. I'm biased, of course, but I think it's honestly true. There are so many regulations and more to come to make sure that that is consistent. And there are hundreds of thousands of flights every single day that operate incredibly safely to and from the destination in a very complex working environment. So, yeah.
Because of our operations locally, our air traffic controller is going to bump in pay because of how busy we are and to retain them.
And I'd also add too, not to give away our presentations in a couple of weeks, but what we're looking at is obviously we want to increase our destinations, but we want to increase our capacity, and that is not necessarily going to be more flights. It's going to be larger planes, and Project Next is giving us that capability, and not just currently, bringing in more mainline aircraft like the 737, et cetera, but looking to the future of what airline industry is going to look like, and that might mean vertical
That might be you're coming in from Los Angeles or Houston or whatever, you land in Burlington, and you take a small 6-seater that takes off vertically, created a beta, and flies to Stowe. We're really trying to look to the future of what this is going to look like, but one of our biggest pitches down there is we want to see less of the regional aircraft, because it's a domino effect. I actually experienced this on Friday when there was a storm system that went through the East Coast, and I had to get to Arizona for a wedding. My Philadelphia flight was canceled, and we did not have enough seats to make up for that. So we recognize that, and that's a big part of our pitch when we meet with the airlines in a couple of weeks.
Do you have to drive the Porsche instead?
What's that?
Did you have to drive the Porsche instead of the thing?
Not a Porsche,
No,
it's not a Porsche,
no,
it's
no.
Ford.
No.
An electric Porsche.
Electric. Porsche.
Porsche.
Just to clarify, the airport is not driving Porsche.
Well, thank you. Thank you for, yeah,
you very
very,
much.
very good
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Hope this was easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Used to be an air traffic controller, everything's easy.
So next on the agenda would be the Williston Housing Targets, Act 181.
So I'll have Matt walk the board through these. Planning Commission chatted about this earlier this evening. The Select Board has an opportunity, if it wants to submit a comment memo to the Regional Planning Commission. The original deadline was the 19th. They said it's fine if we send it in this week because the meeting was tonight. So I'll turn to Matt, and you just need to tap the microphone, Matt, for what's on the bottom. There you go.
Everybody can see the light but me.
Yeah.
You're sitting in front of the microphone.
No, it's very,
Eric, do you want me to screen share the memo?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I can go ahead and
I'll make you.
hopefully do that. Join as panelist. Great. So as Eric said to you, the Planning Commission just took a look at this draft memo mere minutes ago and sent me over here with it and a couple of added recommendations of what it might say that I'll go over. But a little bit of background on what this is all about. We've received from CCRPC these draft housing targets for Williston. They come out of an apportionment of the draft housing target for Chittenden County, and that in turn comes out of a housing target for the state of Vermont that was required to be generated as part of the adoption of Act 181 during the last biennium of the legislature. So that's why we're here, because the law said this is what needs to happen. And just to be clear, these targets, the low, mid, and high target numbers for 2050 are not in any way regulatory. There's no or else if the town doesn't meet them. They are understood as a range of numbers that afford the region and the state various levels of response to the current housing shortage that the state is facing. So that's what that is. And if I can find my share button. The memo includes some attachments that'll help me kind of explain where we're going with this. All right, you'll see it in a second.
And these are targets, they're not requirements. So
Right.
The housing creating police are not going to come to us if we don't hit the targets, but these are good guidelines for the town moving forward to be thinking about, especially on a county and statewide basis.
Yeah.
Based on estimated growth.
These targets are based on need. In other words, need for workforce, need for expansion of the vacancy rate beyond the very low levels it's been at some time. So these aren't saying we expect people to come to Vermont and we need houses for them. These are saying people in Vermont can't afford housing and there needs to be a broader market in which they can buy or rent housing, and this is the amount by which that market needs to expand to provide for that. So it's not quite we expect people to come, it's we need this now to support our workforce, our demographics, and the fact that housing is very expensive here, in part because the supply is quite limited. So I like to start right in the middle of the memo because that's the best place to start, where I did just display this table. So you see these numbers, the headings across the top, you have the low, mid, and high columns, You have the historic 2000 to 2023 rate of growth for each community. That's a units per year rate. And then you have what the annual units per year would look like in the low, mid, and high targets for each community. So just jumping right in, I'm not going to go through all the communities. The line for Williston is near the bottom because we're a W. And that high target is 4,700, or sorry, the number today of units in Williston is 4,725. Low target is 1,402, mid target 2,807, and the high target at 4,212. Our historic per year production of dwelling units from 2000 to 2023 is 70 units per year. The low target is below that, 56 units per year. The mid target's a little bit more than that at 112, and the high target is at 168. When Williston was growing at its very most sort of rapid pace in the early to mid 1990s, there were a few years running around 120 units a year, just for context. And like I said, I'm not going to go through all of the communities and their numbers, but just understand there was a conversation with the Regional Planning Commission and the Planning Advisory Committee that I sit on of how do we take this countywide target and divide it amongst the communities. It's not a proportion of existing population. It's not necessarily a function of how much developable land there is in each town or city. It's not a proportion of current housing units entirely. Rather, it's a mixture of those things and a little bit of a planning goal of continue to have most of the growth occur where the growth already is. So the communities were divided into cities, rural towns, and mixed urban and rural towns, I think because nobody wanted to say suburbs. And you can see there that the cities, Burlington, Essex Junction, South Burlington, Winooski, are assigned 60% of the county's housing target. So more than anybody else as a percentage of what they already have. The rural towns get 3.8%. So Buell's Gore only needs to add somewhere between 1 and 6 homes between now and 2050. They're not assigned a fundamental change in what they're going to look like or be like. And those mixed urban and rural towns, of which Williston is one, get the remaining 36.2% of the target. So that's where our numbers came from. And you just get a straight percentage of low, mid, and high, and that's the number you work with. So the memo is about responding to those numbers. And so what I drafted and what the Planning Commission's generally okay with is a memo that says, number one, we're supportive of these numbers, their existence as a distribution of the countywide target. We're supportive of the way that CCRPC got to them, the methodology I just explained. And just explaining that the medium and high ranges expressed for Williston both represent a significant increase over our historic rate of growth on a units per year basis. And just, boiling that down into numbers and really cutting to the chase and saying that, getting to the medium or certainly the high targets in Williston is heavily dependent on challenges related to infrastructure, especially wastewater treatment capacity. Probably no surprise to anyone in this room that we would talk about that. What follows is a deeper dive into wastewater treatment capacity based on our most recent attachment A that we did in March, showing that we had about 340,000 gallons per day capacity to play with, and then running that against some of the build-out work we've been doing as we've imagined that denser infill type development in Taft Corners and looking at what would physically fit there. And what we see is you could probably approach the mid target with the sewer capacity the town currently owns. You can't quite get to it, and it also means that if you do that in 2050, you have no more sewer capacity left, and you've got to be spending it for the next 25 years predominantly on new residential. You can't be spending it on water-intensive industrial uses or lots and lots of hotels or other things. There needs to be a pretty strong focus on residential to get close to the mid-target with what the town owns for capacity today and is probably likely to have to work with until there's an expansion of treatment capacity at the plant unless and until that happens. So the bold statement at the bottom of that paragraph says there needs to be a regional approach to Chittenden County's wastewater treatment capacity and permitted discharge capacities to support those housing targets. And because that stuff takes a long time, if you want to do it, you got to start doing it yesterday if we want to be in line for those 2050 targets. And I think a comment like this is likely to come from most of the communities in Chittenden County that have wastewater treatment, where most of the new dwellings are expected to be built. We have our constraint. Obviously, the other two municipalities we share the plant with face the same constraint. But I just picked up my home paper in South Burlington. The other paper has a long discussion of this and talks about, guess what, wastewater capacity at the Bartlett Bay plant for South Burlington and bonding for that, and the needs to do that, as well as think about, in their case, water supply, which, yeah, would play into this too at some point. The other points the memo makes are a little more minor, but we've talked about the wastewater infrastructure itself, the pipes and pumps that need to be added to in order to move that waste. And then other things like the transportation infrastructure. We know supporting a significant build out of units requires filling in Williston's street network, its transportation infrastructure. And to do that the way we want to do it, we need access to funding beyond what we've typically had. And I specifically call out the tax increment finance program there. And I say the same thing about wastewater. Talk a little bit about the town plan being generally in accordance with supporting these targets in point 3. And a little bit of a pat on the back for Williston in point 4, which is, hey, you know, we've done a whole bunch of things to fix our zoning, to comply with state law and to be more supportive of the creation of new housing. And I think this is another comment you're going to see that's going to come consistently back from most of our Chittenden County communities, which is the zoning that people maybe thought was the problem and thought was the barrier to housing. State law changed and we all had to go and fix that. And most of us have the zoning capacity in our communities. In other words, it's allowed to build enough homes to meet these targets. It's not a question of disallowing it in your zoning anymore. It's a question of supporting it with all of those critical infrastructure pieces that need to be there in order for it to work. So pat on the back, we did that. It felt hard when we did it. Turns out it was probably the easiest part of this whole equation was adjusting our zoning. You know, and that said, access to planning funding through the Municipal Planning Grants Program, CCRPC Unified Planning Work Program, remains critical to continuing to be able to make progress on our regulatory and our long-range planning side for these things. And those are things that are always good to go, you know, either to CCRPC or to Montpelier and advocate for. Statewide funding for planning is really important to the work we do. And that's the memo. I just want to mention, because it's kind of fun to look at and you can really go in the weeds, but how we talked about how does this new development we think might happen turn into wastewater. This calculation sheet.
Hope it doesn't turn into wastewater.
Yeah, not the development itself. It just results in wastewater at the plant. Let's put it that way. We did it two ways, and this actually came out of some of the TIF study work we were doing. One is we looked at some of our most densely developed parts of Taft Corners, and we created a gallons per day per developable acre metric. So just measure the acres that a big building in Finney is sitting on, how much of that acreage is developable, how many gallons is it producing, and a little bit why, like what's the use going on inside the building that drives that. And then we can just apply that to all of the developable acres that remain in our growth center. So we did that, and that generated this 217,000 gallons per day. And then we turned around and tried it a different way, which we actually had little pretend buildings on the map with little pretend apartments inside. And we know how many little pretend gallons of sewer they're supposed to produce. So we counted it up that way, and we got 199,000. So we were 17,000 gallons apart, not too bad for two vastly different calculation methods. And then we turned around and we tried it again, and this time we started by selecting the buildings and got this number, the 243,552. And then we said, okay, well, what's the acreage those buildings are sitting on? Let's try it that way. And that's where we got the 299, 210. So roughly 300,000 gallons per day on the high end, 200,000 gallons per day on the low end. And if you look at the amount of units this creates, it's 2,490, mix of 2 and 1 bedroom units. Again, approaching but not quite making it to the mid-target that CCRPC is giving us. But this is just another way of looking at it. And if you scroll to the side, it comes with a fun little map, which is going to be too small to really see. But on this map is the grid street layout of the form-based code district, and these little tiny purple, blue, light blue, and white rectangles that actually represent 3-story apartment buildings with a modest amount of commercial on the ground floor. That's how we backed into the gallons per day. So we really did try to back up all of this commentary with some as close to real world estimates of what we're looking at for our infrastructure picture and making these comments. So we would recommend providing this as well. Comments that came over from the Planning Commission that are addition to this that the Select Board might want to consider. Essex Junction, when they made their comments, they wrote a paragraph just mentioning, so all this stuff is great, but we know the development community is facing some pretty significant headwinds that we don't have a whole lot of control over right now, and we expect that to play a factor in the achievement of these goals. I can certainly work with somebody to come up with a paragraph that says that without perfectly copying what Essex Junction said, but it's certainly true here. The other was just, being clear that, Williston's done a lot to support this stuff. Williston's, interested in that. One Planning Commission member did bring up the other headwind that you continue to face whenever you're talking about growth and change is that not everybody likes growth and change, and some people even come and speak out against it and vote against it. And like all of our other neighboring communities, there's a headwind associated with that sometimes, whether it's I don't like tall buildings, I don't like big buildings, I don't like more buildings, etc. One person in a meeting once got really frustrated and it ended with, I don't like people. Yeah, that's the trouble is it comes with people. Lastly, one of your colleagues had a really good question, which was, what about the pipeline right now? And how does that play into like maybe the first 5 years of this 25-year model? So I thought, oh, well, not that long ago, we did the growth report. And if I can bring that up, forget if I have it in a tab, where we try to predict new growth and look at the pipeline. And while I'm trying to bring that up, I may not be able to. Oh, here it is. I don't know why. I may need to stop the share and reselect. It's in Adobe. So we look at the next 5 years.
While Matt's pulling that up, all the great work him and his team have done on that wastewater modeling, we fed that all to our consultant who's doing the modeling for what we need for the infrastructure from a potential TIF district to support, that growth pattern. So that work should be wrapping up the next few weeks, and that's going to help inform our TIF analysis the next couple of months, and we'll have that presented to you on the wastewater side. It's really interesting, regardless if we achieve a district or not. It's going to be potential needs and investment in infrastructure to achieve these outcomes.
Yeah. So the question about what's in the pipeline, this is what we do in the fall growth report, and we take this estimate of every single unit in a permitted project that we think might remotely possibly be built in the upcoming 5 years. And for that list, we come to 783 new homes. This is in permitted projects. If all of this were to build by 2030, that's about 156.5 units per year. So it's still below the 170 per year high target. It's above the mid target that CCRPC has given us. But I'd put a huge asterisk on this. 607 of those 783 are predicted in the Taft Corners area. That's the orange here. And, the 59 with 3JT mixed use, that's the infamous 6-story building. That hasn't seemed to be going anywhere. The 24 in Aldi Phase 2, well, that would be after Aldi, and that hasn't really shown up yet either, although it does have an active permit. Annex senior housing, these 65 ended up not happening. those 65 are on there, but probably further toward the end of annex. The overall annex build-out, the 237, that's everything else residential in the annex project north of Finney Crossing. That's feeling like that would probably be pretty fast for that to all be done by 2030. Cottonwood Crossing, we plugged in 141, that's 47 a year in 28, 29, and 30, so we wouldn't need to be seeing it now, but we're just not sure. Cottonwood's been kind of on again, off again for a while. So there's some things there that are slow. Some of these other projects, we do think Glazer Summerfield will likely get off the ground. Sally's Way is under construction. Alaire might move forward with its 2 units, but again, we put these on the boards because by permit they could build by 2030, but every year we push this stuff off another year. I don't think you're going to get the whole 783 out of this pipeline in the first 5 years of the growth target, but you'll probably get some of it.
But it is part of the 2,800 that they want us to build.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So it's a question of what it puts the town on track for by itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was all to be built, it would put the town on track for something just under the high target, but above the mid target. More realistically, I think this will come in a little bit under the mid target with what's in the pipeline right now for those first 5 years. So that's just another piece of information to consider. And we could put this in as an attachment to the memo too and say, by the way, here's what we think is coming right now, just as information back to the RPC.
Might give us another 800 though on top of our target, so be careful.
They could. I don't think, until these targets get tied to something, some incentive or some regulatory thing, it's kind of just a number, sort of like the Building Homes Together 1.0 and 2.0 have been. Well, here's the number and here's how much of it we think ought to be affordable, and then we kind of just end up talking about how close did we get to the target this year, each year. I think these will be used in a similar way.
I think my concerns might be two. What I'm puzzling with is to say, yep, if you get us the stormwater, the middle target looks like something Williston could do. But it's not just stormwater, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And so I'm a little concerned with, yep, Williston Selectboard says, mid-target looks pretty good, because there's so many other complicating factors. And even though, yes, this isn't tying us to anything legally, it's still, people could clearly come back and say, hey, the select board supported 3,000 more homes, so where's your support, select board? Come on, you gotta help. So I do have some concerns, and it kind of comes around, I know right now TIF is sort of a dirty word in some places, but it does come down to no one's gonna build without the infrastructure in place, and the town is not going to float a bond to put the infrastructure in place for more growth. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, just feels like a huge stumbling block. They can make all the pretty charts they want, but until somebody figures that out, I don't see it happening any faster than sort of our organic, growth that's happening now.
Personally, I feel comfortable with the language additions that you've put in there about, wastewater capacity within the town. And I think that, the limitations, with infrastructure, I think, that is, as Jean said, that's the biggest thing. But I do feel that it's important that we challenge ourselves and that we be part of the effort to challenge our, the greater community, because this is an unmet need, and because, as you stated, this isn't folks coming in and needing housing. This is already folks within our state that are underhoused or unhoused or needing different housing options, or overpaying, or their housing needs are just not being met within our state. And we have a responsibility, and so I do think it's important we challenge ourselves in that way, and I think that's what CCRPC is helping us do with these numbers. So.
It does kind of raise a question that I had in my head, though. If all these people are already here, why is there any impact on wastewater?
Well, they're not necessarily here in town. Like the,
They're not here in
They're
Chittenden
not
County.
overnight.
Right, right.
Yeah, but they're somewhere.
It's a good question. I think a small piece of the answer is shrinking household size.
Yeah.
So fewer people making less wastewater need more homes as demographically the household size shrinks. You know,
But that goes back to the fact that we've been overestimating or overestimating, not even right. We've been using too high a wastewater number for houses.
Right.
So that's, that number could come down. I'm just thinking that banking everything on, we can't grow unless we get wastewater is, there's probably a lot of holes you could punch in that, given.
yeah. I mean, the numbers I gave you, and you'll see this in the memo, I applied a 2/3 factor to it. So I said, of what we make somebody buy, they end up using about 2/3 of it on average, to try to give the numbers a little more of a real-world feel. If we just were to sell straight gallons, if you take 340,000 gallons and divide by 230 gallons per two-bedroom unit, you don't get even close to the mid-target. This assumes that continuing pattern of sell it, and then somebody uses what they use, and then we pick that number up at the meter, and then we sell it to somebody else again and again and again over 25 years. It's the only way you get anywhere near the target with what the town owns today. But I agree, that's it's an issue when you're doing this kind of planning, is how much capacity do you really need? And part of that is the math, and part of that is also the policy questions of, do you want to say no more water-intensive uses in the industrial district, we're all in on housing? Or do you want to say no more hotels in Taft Corners? They use as much wastewater as housing, and we'd rather have apartments than hotel rooms. That comes with a loss of tax revenue, no local option revenue for apartments versus hotels, changes in service demand, et cetera. So, pull one string and you got the whole sweater pretty quick.
I mean, I think that would be helpful to, add into this piece in the memo to the CCRPC would be that, our development goals are not strictly related to residential in town. We are trying to promote commercial and industrial and things as well. And so that, that further factors into, our available wastewater capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So the decision point for us is whether we say, yes, we want this memo to go out to the I always get that wrong. PC. I feel like I'm saying Soviet Union in the CC.
I learned to say CBOEO real fast, so now I'm like, CCRPC is easy, I got that.
But that's what we're confronted with tonight.
Yeah, and I think, Eric, there's some room here for some guidance from the board of, I like the memo, but please add something about this, and then we can work that out before we transmit it over.
Yeah, essentially it's your comments on these housing targets. The RPC is going to take all the communities' comments. Essentially, they need to produce a report to the state per Act 181. So I think what Matt's prepared with the Planning Commission is good. It hits, these main themes. I think it's a good idea for the select board as a legislative body to have an official voice to this, and it's your discretion what you want that message to say.
So the additions or changes that we want, or basically or may or may not want, is what Jean was talking about.
Well, I think I would like to be a little stronger on the infrastructure. The town will not be able to provide infrastructure ahead of housing. So, that whole, it's in here, maybe make it a little more forceful, I guess, is that it really would be a showstopper.
I think being clear that putting it on the backs of existing taxpayers to, go and build a new street just on the existing Williston tax base for somebody new to come in is not realistic.
Not realistic.
There needs to be other ways that infrastructure comes online.
Right. And then I think Greta's point about the fact that you can't have all of our wastewater capacity, that, I don't know how you'd even make up a number, but, that's some of that, 20, 35%, some of that's got to go to other
If you
town
just look at
goals.
Schedule A and what we've allotted, we allot each,
Yeah, in our modeling for Taft Corners, we assumed a modest commercial component in every building just to try to, on average, capture that some of what happens in Taft Corners is commercial. But we drew a boundary around the form-based code area, so we did not assume we would be selling any capacity out into the suburbs or to Williston Village or to the industrial district. And so it's a math exercise of saying, well, if we went all in the form-based code area, we could get close to the mid-target. but we know that we're not gonna do that. We know that we will sell capacity to people in other parts of town who have things that meet zoning requirements out there.
Probably the biggest challenge is not wastewater, but the Chatham County Regional Planning Commission and traffic congestion and, 18 years to get a sidewalk underneath the interstate, exit 12 off ramps and, the problems that we're having with traffic updates, from state highways. We're 15, 20 years waiting for any changes on that we can forecast problems with now.
Right, so it's not just local
20
roads.
We're waiting 15, 20 years now. I don't see that changing.
Yeah, those Circ Alternatives Phase 3 projects, that exit 12 area, and what's going on right now on Route 2A is one of those projects, but yeah, all those additional pinch points that need to be addressed in that state transportation network without the Circ Highway, that all factors in.
The North Williston Road and the River Road, traffic backed up to the, bridge. Things like that, there's something should be done there with all this Route 2A work being done. State is dumping all the traffic off on roads that weren't prepared for the traffic before. Now there's double the traffic.
Yeah.
That's nothing we have any control over.
No, but ultimately, when these projects are done, it will help improve, so hopefully.
More people, more housing will just make the congestion worse.
I do think it's worth mentioning, it's not just our local town roads, it's gonna be the state roads and the interstate.
So do you have enough to go on and?
I may have to watch this video tomorrow morning to do it, but
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I think guidance around those couple points is pretty easy to work into this. And I use the word infrastructure, it does a lot of heavy lifting, but I can specifically call out that, we have these dependencies on a state-managed transportation system that takes a long time to upgrade, has historically taken a long time to upgrade, and we would anticipate would need improvements to handle this increase in the number of people in town and the region.
And the deadline for submitting this, we're past deadline, is that what
As yesterday.
No, I talked to the RPC and they said, get it in the next couple days is fine. They
Okay.
understood, there were some
So-
board meetings this week, so.
I'd volunteer to take a look at it for the board if
Yeah,
you want.
okay.
I appreciate all the work that
Yeah.
Planning Commission and zoning have done for this, A lot of work.
Thank
Trying to make things work out.
And overall, I mean, I'm pleased to see that we're hit as a town already hitting kind of that low number and that expectation. But again, I think this gives us, some homework to do and some things to think about as, how, what do we need to do to encourage more development?
It's worth noting two things about that. Number one, the countywide target is a really wide range. It's between 15 and 45,000
Yeah.
homes.
So
that's number one. Number two is, while we look at our low target and see that, well, we've already been building faster than our low target rate for some time, that's not true in all of the communities. So if you take another look at that table, you'll see that places like Burlington have not been producing housing anywhere near even the pace to meet their low target, which just speaks to how much harder it is to build stuff in Burlington, whether you're talking, physically harder or more appeals or more rigorous development review system or, just lower land supply. It's not true for every one of these communities that the low target is easy or something that they're already doing.
Right.
And I believe the countywide low target as a rate is above the historical countywide rate as well. Don't quote me on that. I don't have the table in front of me.
Almost. there.
Almost.
Yeah.
So would people be comfortable with, if the process being that Matt would make the edits, and then Jean would have a chance to look over that, and we'll kind of designate Jean to be the select board?
I promise not to make too many
The select board's San
changes to
Juan.
Matt's version.
Okay, all right. So we are running late, so I'm wondering if we can The board is comfortable with
Yep.
moving
Yep.
on
Yep,
from this?
absolutely.
All right, so Matt, do you want to stand up and pretend you're coming back for the next thing? Because you're up,
Thank you
you're
for
up
having
again. Yeah, so,
Hi, Matt.
town plan draft transmittal discussion.
So, on your agenda tonight was specifically a conversation about economic development. Eric provided you with an up-to-the-minute edit of the economic development chapter in the draft town plan, and I think what you're likely to see transmitted back to you from the Planning Commission is pretty close to what you got late last week, but there may be a few more tweaks in there. And I'm prepared tonight to kind of, what I'd like to do is just answer questions folks have about this, following just a really brief introduction, and maybe tie in some of the land use goals and some things in some of the other chapters of the plan that have a nexus to economic development, depending on what the questions of the board are. But the brief introduction to this chapter is, number one, we have one, and it's more than a paragraph long this time, which represents a pretty good step forward as far as Williston's town plans. There's a much stronger recognition in this draft town plan that Williston's economy, not just its residential population, is a really big part of the town. It's a big part of how the town functions. It's part of how town operations are funded. It's by and large the biggest generator of activity in the town in terms of people coming and going from town to work and visit, shop. They leave a lot of money here. People leave more money here in Williston than they leave in any other municipality in the state, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And Williston makes use of that through the local option sales tax. And what we do about our land use and our infrastructure policy and the way we operate the town and the way we make things harder or easier for business all has an impact on the economy in Williston and could have an impact on the achievement of any goals we have for economic development. So that's my brief intro. We have a chapter. It's bigger than it used to be. It connects to lots of the rest of the plan. The economy in Williston is really important. And what else can I be of assistance with when we talk about this part of the plan?
I think supporting local businesses that are here already is important. You know, the state of Vermont has lost a lot of its manufacturing jobs over the years. You know, and I feel that, you know, New England Chimney Supply was here last week telling us that they also have a plant in Virginia. They added 40 more jobs there. They also have a office in Connecticut. They're locally owned. They grew up here. They're looking to expand. They're in the Gateway West, district. It's almost all commercial now, from Taft Corners all the way to South Burlington. It's all commercial except for a couple of houses along Williston Road. They already own the property. They've proven to be good neighbors. They're good for the community. And, if we don't do something to help them, we're gonna lose a business that has a lot of good, over 100 jobs. And going back and explaining why we lost another business in Williston and built another business in Vermont to another state because they're more business friendly, I don't think that's a very good view of Williston for businesses coming in.
I don't disagree with most of that or any of it really, but I don't know if the town plan is where we can address a specific single business. It's a conceptual thing and a bigger, broader brush that we're looking at for this. But I do agree that I need to educate myself more about the issue that you're bringing up, and I've reached out to Matt about that, and we're gonna be meeting about that. Not that I'm not meeting with him as the select board representative or something, but just anything I learn, I'll bring back to the board.
I think other sections of this plan really address those areas that are in contention, where you have residential and commercial in contention, and how the usages, some of those gateway areas have changed over time. I mean, it could have been, you could be 100% right, and I'm gonna go with your 100% right, that it's all commercial now, even the houses are really just rentals or whatever, but it's hard to, but that would be like that would be a reason to, I do have a lot of sympathy for people who have owned a house for a really long time and they're getting run over by commercial properties, you know, so we have to be careful, I guess is all my point. You know, I'm not saying in this particular one, I do not have enough information to even begin to make a statement on whether that's the right thing to do or not, but there's some houses on North Brownell now that are getting sort of, they used to have a nice tree buffer, but the commercial's pushing into almost to the backyards, and it's zoned correctly, that's what's gonna happen. But I do feel bad for people a lot of us, most of our wealth is in our homes, and to have that kind of get stolen because you are no longer in a desirable neighborhood because you're getting overrun with commercial, I think is sad and tragic for some of those folks. So I think we have to be careful. I think the planning department and the planning commission is aware of those push points and are trying to do the right thing. Is that fair, Matt?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up a couple things that are outside of the economic development chapter. The first is there's a bunch of action items in chapter 15, which is all of the land use areas that we don't think of as rural. So it's the mixed use, higher density residential, industrial, commercial districts. And you'll see a bunch of these evaluate changes to zoning in the following places, including in the area of Brownell Road, where River Cove Road intersects Route 2A, and a few others where we have some commercial outliers or we have residential up against commercial. And our zoning is fairly rigid, that the residential goes in residential and the commercial goes in commercial. Of course, the map doesn't really look that way, and hence we have some friction. And I'll show you really briefly what that looks like on the map. So these numbers are the same numbers I was just showing you on that yellow table. These are all numbers that talk about parts of town where there's something going on with zoning that doesn't really match what's on the ground. So that Chimney Supply, Commerce Street, Brownell Road area is one of them. Up where River Cove Vet is, River Cove Vet on Route 2A is actually in the residential zone. Currently cannot be really expanded or modified in any way per the zoning. Some of our industrial zone is mapped down around River Cove Road in the flood zone, where probably it shouldn't ever be developed for anything. So you see that. We have this whole industrial east area that's the sort of the IBM CSWD Velco zone that hasn't really gotten a lot of attention about what do people really want there. It's just sort of a zone that was written, somebody called it once the as-is zone. We have some conversations about where the village ends and the residential district begins. So these are specific places on the map. And the other thing I'll just note, this is the future land use map in the draft town plan, is, you know, if you kind of squint, it looks really nice. There's this big dark green rural area surrounding areas that get more and more intense as you go in. But if you don't squint and you start to zoom in, you start to see these places like that Brownell Road area where there's this finger of residential sort of sticking down into a well of industrial, and then that leaves this sort of skinny little bit of industrial up against the form-based code areas, you know, sharing part of Blair Park Road with the form-based code area. And there's a few other places like that. Figuring out where to set the border between residential and industrial up where Brownell Road comes into Industrial Ave, depending on where you put that line, you're either putting some homes in the industrial district or some businesses in the residential district, and it's a challenge for some of the owners up there. So just by way of example, there's a strong tie where we started this conversation in the economic development chapter. We want to support small businesses. People told us over and over again during our public engagement they want to see more opportunity for people to have small and local businesses in town. And there are things you can do in your zoning to try to, number one, make sure it's not so hard that the only business that can come in is the big one that's got the really expensive lawyers, right? You try to make your zoning user-friendly and flexible, things like that. And you also might think about your zoning in terms of its standard for the sizes of certain things. Like creating opportunities for small retailers in Taft Corners means encouraging a different style of building and site than if you want to bring in a big box. So having your development standards reflect that as well. So these are all ways that the economic development chapter kind of branches out and talks about land use, talks about infrastructure, et cetera. And just to put a point on, you know, this part is heavily written by the staff who have been through the decade of DRB meetings where these businesses have run up against friction or where neighbors have said, you know, I'm really not happy that my backyard is zoned industrial and, you know, what's going on the other side of that line? How are we going to buffer that appropriately? Those are things we've spent a lot of time on and have tried to help the Planning Commission identify areas of focus where they can go in and initiate work on these. So that's the other part, is when you do the town plan, you're identifying a work plan for the Planning Commission in terms of what are the zoning changes they're going to go work on. And the intent here is that these ones are prioritized over someone who just sort of shows up a year from now and says, hey, I'd really like you to change the zoning on my land because I want to do something different. The pushback then from the Planning Commission is, well, we're going to work on the ones the town plan told us were really important probably first before we start putting effort into those customized ones. But if you really want to get in front of us, you could apply for a specific plan. And, you know, we've had specific plans that were approved, like Glazer, and we've had ones that didn't get over the goal line, like Chimney Supply. In both of those cases, we didn't have something on the map that said, address zoning here. So it needed to be applicant-driven. Where we're going in this town plan, 1524 puts that Brownell intersection back on the map and says this is an area that needs some attention. We learned a lot going through the Chimney Supply specific plan application. And we learned a lot more about how challenging it is to deal with those really different types of uses, commercial or industrial, residential, and gateway commercial, all up against each other in an area with busy traffic, in an area with airport noise, as you were just talking about before, in an area with a broad diversity of uses and not really great or continuous bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So it's in there. The current draft plan assigns the Planning Commission and Select Board the job, among others, of working on this part of town.
So I feel that this, you know, this is something that we should be working on. This is something that, you know, let's support a local small-owned business.
And so I think to Ted's point, and I think that's something that, you know, we can discuss, but I do think, like, agenda-wise, this is not, that is a separate discussion we need to have, and that we need to support businesses, but not in this discussion right now, like as part of the town plan agenda item here.
So the idea then is just to, let's make this a priority and put it on a future agenda.
Well, we can look at, getting it onto a future agenda item, but not in this item right here.
Yep.
You know, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah,
Why is
I
that
agree.
a select board? Just
But,
not
yeah,
planning?
that's the
Well,
planning.
So essentially, the select board can direct the planning commission if you'd
Yeah.
like them to be working on this at a certain.
But not right now, because
But
it's
not
not on
tonight.
tonight's agenda.
Right, not tonight, but I think it's important enough tonight that we put it on an agenda.
I will take appropriate action.
I have a couple of just real specific ones. I think they're short. I asked for this to be on the agenda tonight because this is, of all the chapters I read, this one I just really felt that we all should have read this one. And it was a very, very long document that we didn't all have time to go through every page, but this one, you know, we're kind of saying that we're gonna sign off on this, that this is the direction we want the town to go, and I just thought it's easier to kind of focus on 6 pages than 196, whatever it was. Matt, on 441, it's got like a $4 sign on next to it, so, and a star, so I thought maybe could you just talk to what that one is a little bit? I was a little bit confused on what it was exactly.
Sure. So one of the things we recognized when we did the form-based code project and the Taft Corners Vision Plan is that new development is going to need to treat its stormwater. It's going to need to treat its stormwater in a way that's more consumptive of land area or is more expensive than it used to have to, certainly more so than anything that's been built so far. And one of our observations in our neighboring community that's got a form-based code, South Burlington, is planning for stormwater one building at a time really tends to undermine the streetscape that you're trying to get, because you get a stormwater pond and then you get a building, and then you get a stormwater pond and a building. And you're dealing with, in Taft Corners, a couple of different landowners, not 100 different landowners, maybe 6. And wouldn't it be better if they all worked together on master planning their stormwater? And wouldn't it be more likely for them to do that if the town was able to encourage them to do that, or get them access to planning funding through the Regional Planning Commission or other grant programs to do that? So that's what this action item is really about. This was called for in the vision plan. We made a few preliminary efforts to think about what this would look like at the staff level, 3 years ago coming out of that project, and we just weren't really ready to take it on, and there wasn't any development quite imminent, but we wanted to still have this in the town plan and say, this is still something we're thinking about.
Okay. Well, I totally get the, I guess I was just double checking my understanding, because there's only one other thing, it's got $4 signs next to it, so I want to make sure this is not, we are going to take over stormwater in Taft's Corners and have a stormwater.
Nope.
So maybe it would be appropriate to not have $4 signs next to it, if what we're doing is helping the landowners get together and plan.
Sure.
A collaborative thing, I might be a little more comfortable.
It's probably $2 signs or $1
Yeah.
sign for us, and $4 to $8 signs for them.
And they're gonna put, but they're gonna do it at some point anyway, so.
Right.
That was my first thought. And then 4.5, I just want, whenever we say like, let's just waive all of Act 250, I just want to make sure I understand what rights we're waiving. And is this because of the law that's already passed, or is this, do we have an option to, given the laws that are passed, to say we want an application for Act 250 Tier 1A status? I don't know what that means.
Sure. So, once again, we find ourselves like the housing targets writing the town plan, and the ground's kind of shifting under our feet at the same time. What came out of Act 181, the side of it that reforms Act 250, is that municipalities may, within certain parts of their boundary, ask for certain levels of exemption to Act 250 to apply. The one you're going to talk about sooner is Tier 1B. That's an exemption for residential projects 50 units and smaller, so that it's limited to one type of use, and it has a size limitation on it. And there's some recommendations from the Regional Planning Commission about what part of town that would work in. But generally, municipalities that have good local planning and zoning don't see site plans change a whole lot once somebody goes through Act 250. Generally, our requirements, if people meet them, they end up meeting the Act 250 criteria.
So what we're saying is, we got this.
We got this. What Tier 1A is all projects inside a Tier 1A boundary, whether they're larger than 50-unit residential or they're commercial or mixed use, all are exempt from Act 250, and the municipality takes on some level of responsibility for making sure old Act 250 conditions remain in force when they're reviewing new applications for development. So it's a more staff-heavy way to go, but it's a broader exemption. It probably facilitates development in the area you apply it to. And in our case, Tier 1A would be something this plan recommends to go for in the vicinity of the growth center, whether it's the growth center boundary or the form-based code within it or something a little bit different. Not all of Williston that's served by water and sewer should be exempt from Act 250 completely, but in this small area, it could be. And just to note that we've had some exemptions like this already over the last 5 or 6 years. What are called the priority housing project exemptions are somewhat similar to this. So we have had projects and have some projects underway in Williston right now that are exempt from Act 250 because of the interim exemptions that came before Act 181. So this is the more permanent exemptions. What this town plan says is it doesn't actually say we would necessarily undertake Tier 1A, we would develop an application to do so, which would be our thought process of what's this really going to take. So when you develop an application, who you're applying to is the Act 250 Land Use Resource Board. You're going to that board and saying, we got this. And then they're going to either agree with you or not. And theoretically then, there's a smoother path to completion of permitting for new development in the area where you establish.
So it encourages growth in a way, but it may
Yeah.
impact staff, our
Yep.
staff, because we have to we're picking up some of the responsibility for that.
We could be, and there's a little bit of rulemaking to follow about how that sort of dealing with old conditions might work. The hope is that there's not a substantial burden placed on the municipalities around that, but it's just the way the law got adopted out of the gate. It may change before we even apply.
There's not a situation in your head where somebody's gonna take advantage of the town by, hey, I don't have to go through Act 250, I'm doing X because you have a loophole in your, whatever, that.
The last time I think Act 250 really saved the town of Williston was when the town of Williston said yes to the Pyramid Mall and Act 250 said no. Honestly, in the whole time I've been here, I've never had something that I thought was counter to the town's goals happen in a new development.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, but maybe Act 250 will catch it. It just doesn't happen. We don't see substantive changes to projects when they go through their Act 250 permitting. If they meet our rules, they generally sail through Act 250, but it takes them an extra 6 to 8 months and $60,000 to $160,000. So if we're trying to get housing done, why have somebody do that if they're meeting the rules that you've spent so much time developing?
I mean, the other really comment I had is a little bit back to maybe what Greta was saying remotely, which is, of course, this is coming out of planning. So the economic development is more than just making it easy to build a building, and I don't, it would be interesting. If anything comes up in the public discussion around, is there ways that the town could be more friendly to new businesses that we want to encourage? Or to Mike's point, is the town doing anything to, keep businesses in town that's really not addressed here anywhere? It's all kind of infrastructure related. It would, and I'm not smart enough to write that, but if it does come up, might be interesting to, is there ways to encourage the kind of commercial growth that we want?
I'm not going to make everybody seasick with it right now, but in the social infrastructure chapter, there's a couple of action items about sort of trying to reinvigorate something like the Williston Area Business Association. We don't, as a town, want to run it, but we'd love to get it going again and then kind of, or figure out how we could help somebody get it going again, as much as anything, because I'd really like that group to exist so I could go talk to them and talk to a bunch of local business owners all in one place. That would be really helpful for a lot of the work we do, to be able to do that. So it is in there, but it's not in this chapter. We could cross-reference it.
Okay.
I had kind of a silly question, and that's on page 6, the top 5 tax receipt towns in Vermont. Is Burlington's line white, and that's why I can't see it?
It's COVID.
It is. Oh, my gosh.
Hidden.
You're right.
Okay. I detected it because
You can kinda see it
it
in
breaks through
2010,
Colchester
yeah.
You can,
in 2010.
Yeah.
And apparently might go down below the line between 2015 and 2020. It goes under
I can't
the
get it even if I highlight it. Yeah, it's the lower line. It used to be above Colchester, and now it's on the bottom.
Yeah, what the
Yeah,
heck did
yeah, you can
Colchester
see
do?
it where it intersects with other.
I don't know, but I was at Costco this weekend.
I guess when Costco went in.
I am, you can ask as nicely as you want. You cannot get more granular data out of the tax department than this, because they don't want any proprietary, competitive information going out. But the first thing about this graph that I always see is like, what is going on in Colchester, that it had such a dramatic increase between 2010 and 2015. The other thing is, this is the first time I've ever inflation adjusted these numbers. So if you don't do that, they look like they're just going up and up and up forever. When you do that, I think it reveals a more realistic trend, especially since this is about money that we, the town, then use to go pay people and buy stuff, which is also all affected by inflation. And I think the modest decrease from the 2005 numbers, particularly 05 to 10, just reflects the advent of online shopping and people buying things in different ways. So,
Because we don't get sales tax revenue if it's online shopping, or
We
do?
do.
I
Yeah,
thought
there
on
was
the
a
other page it said we did, so.
Supreme Court case decision, Wayfair v.
Yeah,
South
yeah, yeah.
Dakota, that was big.
Well, I knew that was state tax, I didn't know if that was our 1% got
Yeah.
added
Yep.
as well.
but Eric,
I think it's from IP address order, it might be tied to.
so the order has to be made in Williston.
Yeah, by
Right.
IP address.
So what you're seeing where
Oh, I
it
see.
goes
People- other
down,
people, yeah.
right, is
They're
the
not coming
person,
here
the person who's not coming here to buy something anymore because
Yeah.
they're ordering it from home.
That makes
Yeah.
sense, yeah.
But, that said, it's interesting to look at the relative positions of the municipalities. I think South Burlington's line reflects trends at the U-Mall, for example. And maybe we'll see a bump up as they've added, diversity of businesses back in. I mean, what was the Sears Auto building is now like 3 restaurants. So that's bound to do some volume. And of course, everything else that's happening there. But Williston remains the king of retail, stays on top, but is subject to the same trends everybody else is.
These numbers are retail.
Yeah, so this is taxable, this is actually, I think this is gross retail volume, and it's all taxable retail and services. So it's not business-to-business stuff.
Right.
So you said there was a silly question in there.
Just like,
The
the-
Mr. White line.
What's up with the Burlington line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for noticing that, and we'll
It's a
fix it.
stealth-
well,
stealth data.
I thought it was, yeah. It turns my entire decision.
Gotcha. We'll fix it.
Other questions or comments? So,
No one has any typos for Matt? Come on.
I
Oh,
know,
there's-
no typo.
There's
There
gonna
was
be
one
typos.
like 2,000, something that was supposed to be 2,000, that was 200. I found that somewhere.
Well, now I'm gonna have to go look for it.
So,
I'll have to read the
fun.
whole plan again.
I'll find it, I'll find it.
Process-wise, we're anticipating the planning commission will vote this draft out of hearing and get it to you so that we can give you some informational stuff about it next time, and so you can set up for your hearing schedule in July and August. Nevertheless, even if you're on the track for hearing, if you see things you want to change, there will be the opportunity, if you go on that July hearing schedule, to call for changes, and the planning commission has time to respond in their first August meeting to get back to you for your second August meeting. And as I said to everybody, the funnel's getting narrower, the changes are getting smaller as we wind down through this, and the product's getting better. So appreciate your time on this.
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your
Thanks,
work.
Matt.
And it was the middle paragraph on page 5.
Okay.
In parentheses. It says 200 when it should say 2,000.
Okay.
Knew there had to be one. You put one in there for us sometimes, Matt. See who can find the typo.
But there's no time limit on making technical, grammatical, and non-substantive corrections. We can do those this time next year. If you find one, we will go in and fix it.
Okay,
All right.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that does bring us to the Local Emergency Management Plan 2025.
Yeah, so this has to be updated annually. It's an exercise that the fire department does through its function as Chief Services Emergency Management Director. A lot of it, I share it with the select board. We share that. We don't post that, but it has contact information and just hazard locations in town and good emergency planning. So the select board needs to adopt this annually. It's sent through the Regional Planning Commission, I think, to the state. If the board has any questions, the chief's on Zoom to answer them this evening.
Questions from the board?
I only have one. Does the town, well, I have a question about the pets, but it's late. I won't ask about that. Does the town have a way to, like, text everybody in town if there's a serious emergency? I'm thinking like a tanker fire in the middle of Taft's Corners, or, something that, like the airplane that luckily was that serious, but airplane going down. Is there I know some towns do. I get alerts from some of the other CVSD towns.
Yeah, so it's not a tool the town has in-house, but the town works with the VT alert system. So
Yeah.
there's different ways where people can subscribe to different categories of alerts, and those can be sent out with even a geofence to the area. It's something we've looked at. Public Works uses it for, maybe road closures with like a culvert failure.
Oh, right.
But it's certainly something we can have more of a public campaign on to get
Yeah.
people to subscribe to it. I subscribe to the alerts for Chittenden County for weather and traffic, just things that I get alerts on. But we have the ability to push those alerts out. It's just getting the user base subscribed to it. And Chief can expand on that, so I'll get them connected here.
Yeah, and that might be good, especially given we have so many more daytime people, than actual residents, so sending it out, anybody could subscribe.
Yeah, absolutely. Chief will be
Get
joining
one
us.
of those bat lights.
A bat signal.
Good evening, Chief.
Hi, Chief.
Oh, I think you might be muted, Chief. Let's see, it says you're unmuted.
Yeah. How about now?
Yep, we've got you now.
Great. Gene, thanks for the question. We actually do have the ability, so to Manager Wells' point about the geofence, in a dire emergency, regardless of the subscription or not, we can work with VEM. And then VEM can put that geofence around that area. And then so we could do that all notification. So even if you don't have the subscription, it is going to go to all carriers in that location, but that's in an extreme and emergency.
But if it was just a medium emergency, like Route 2 is going to be closed for the next 12 hours?
That's subscription based.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think maybe we should just get the word out more, so.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, no worries.
Other questions?
No, my pet's going to be taken care of now in an emergency, so I'm very happy. The disaster animal response team, that's got to be new. Has that always been in there, or is that new?
It's new to the plan. It's new. It's part of the state emergency operations plan. Really coming out of the July 23 and July 24 floods is that we're recognizing that people won't leave their homes in floodwaters without the provision for pet care. And so VDART, which is the acronym for the folks that help out with that, we just made sure to include VDART in the plan this year, really facilitated through the direction of the state emergency management team.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if there are no more questions or concerns, there is a proposed motion.
Move to approve the 2025 local emergency operations plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. And that would bring us up to the manager's report.
I will be brief here. I just wanted to highlight and recognize in its service. Last week was National Police Appreciation Week, so I want to recognize our staff, and this week is National EMS Appreciation Week. So want to recognize all our providers and staff, our career fire department and our call staff who are vital delivering that service to our residents and visitors every day. A couple updates that aren't in my report. Chatted with Bruce today. It looks like our parking lot project is on track to get started in mid-June or so. So we'll have some exact dates and some logistical planning coming up for that. Our pedestrian bridge project on Industrial Avenue, we're hearing it's probably October-ish timeline. We've got the thing ordered, now they're building it. So we've told them before the snow flies, we want to have this done. So, and Bruce told them it does snow in early November sometimes. So we're moving that forward. Just want to congratulate officers Avery Lemna and John Hamlin, who were selected earlier this month to begin their assignments in our Bureau of Criminal Investigation detective roles for the town. It's great we've been able to fill these for the first time in 10 years. They'll be doing work on a community outreach as well. We decided to put 2 people in the role. they're off and running, working days here, and they are busy. So, just recognize them. Local options tax Q3 report is included with your packet. This is typically the lower quarter for us throughout the fiscal year. As you recall, this is the year where we have increased the overall estimate. We're about, right around 75% of what we'd expect for the year. So we're about just $1,100,000 off our budgeted target for Q4. You'll see when you look at it, the rooms and meals are really a strength. The last number of quarters here post-COVID, as that recovery's come in, it's helping to offset some lower, if there's some lower sales tax quarters. So we monitor it closely. We'll see where we end up the year. For FY25, we didn't increase the revenue too much here either, so we'll keep an eye on it, keep the board posted. As Matt said, it's hard to get data we can't get granular data from the tax department, so it can be very hard to model these, so some of it's based on market condition predictions and where things are trending in recent years. And actually, I will stop there because the hour is late and we have executive sessions.
Okay. That would bring us therefore, so that's it? It'd bring us to other business?
2 catering permits, one at the Isham Family Barn by 802 Cocktails on August 23rd. 80-person wedding reception, and then Isham Family Barn, June 12th to June 14th, 802 Cocktails. It's bar service at the 4-day theater production, built inside the barn at the venue, for the venue. I'm sure Mike can answer any questions about these.
None of those are yours?
That is, you keep saying that, but it is.
Still not your event, Jean?
No, not my event yet. I thought it was, August 23rd, I thought we were getting close.
Okay.
Becomes real.
Keep an ear out for it. I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those abstaining? And then the motions are carried. That would therefore bring us to final thoughts on items from this meeting. Are there any final thoughts circling back to items that we've covered tonight? Hearing none, that would therefore bring us to the anticipated executive session, and there is a proposed motion.
I'll move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a contract and a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a contract and a labor relations agreement with employees under Title I, Sections 313A1, A and B of the Vermont statutes to discuss a possible real estate transaction under Title I, Section 313A2, and the appointment of a public officer under Title I, Section 313A3, and invite Planning Director Matt Boulanger to join the discussion about the appointment of a public officer, and Town Manager Eric Wells to join all discussions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are now going to go into executive session. We will not be returning to public session this evening, so after executive session is over, we will be adjourned. So, thank you.